USCHO.com.
Welcome to USCHO Edge for Wednesday, March 22nd, 2023. Each week we handicap and prognosticate some games of the weekend. This time it is for the regionals. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida. Get your tickets at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Dan Rubin. It is the regional round. There are 8 matchups we're going to talk about. And one thing I want to mention before we dive in, it is very rare that the number 1 seeds all make it to the Frozen Four. So expect some upsets along the way when you're thinking about it, if you decide to place a wager on some of these games.
Not just rare, it has never happened that all 4 ones make it to the Frozen Four. I'm pretty sure every year there has been one number 1 seed has lost the first round. So it is very difficult. This is not like basketball. I mean, this is technically basketball Sweet 16, right? Like that's the comp that you have to make, or you have to look at one region and see how many number 2 or number 3 seeds would lose in a region. Well, that's a number 1 seed in hockey. So you're going to see some upsets, and probably more than you think in a given weekend.
Well, let's start out kind of in order that the games will get started. And the first game to tip off on Thursday is going to be BU and Western Michigan. That's 2:00 Eastern on ESPN2. In that game, BU is a -135. Western Michigan is a +105. One of the closer matchups that we're going to see today.
Interestingly, they are very close. These are razor thin margins. I think when you really look at these two teams, you know, you have one of the best forwards in the country in Jason Poland. You have one of the best offensive defensemen in the country in Lane Hudson. They're going to face off against each other. I think that Drew Comesso could be an X factor in this game. The goaltender for Boston University has been fantastic down the stretch, especially I thought last weekend as the Terriers won the Hockey East Championship. He had to be, spectacular both nights against both Providence and Merrimack. So I like BU. The over under here. This is the highest over under of the weekend. I think there's 2 games, Michigan being the other one, that have 6.5 as their over under. This is the only game I feel comfortable saying it's okay to hammer the over. And the way we saw games play out last weekend, only one game was over 5 goals, if I'm correct. And that was the 4-3 Big Ten championship game between Minnesota and Michigan, a 4-3 final, 7 goals total. You did not have an 8, 9, 10 goal game anywhere. Goals were hard to come by, and I feel like that will be the case of this weekend. I do think this could be the game where goals pop in and start popping in quickly. But the way that Comesso played last weekend, I'm not sure you're going to see that. You're not going to see him give up 3 or 4, in my opinion. I'm not sure that you're going to see that Western throws 3 or 4, goals, allows 3 or 4 goals. So it still feels difficult, but this is the only game, if I'm going to talk about the over-under, this is the only game I feel comfortable saying they could go over 6.5.
I feel like Western Michigan, and you get a little damaged when a team goes down unexpectedly in its conference championship. Like you start to recency bias, you start to worry, or you start to hammer a team for it. So BU is going to be a slight favorite regardless, just as the better seed, just as everything that goes into forming a tournament. Plus, Western's got to travel across the country, and BU's got a short bus ride up to Manchester. I really do think that Western Michigan, don't be fooled by what happened to them in the quarterfinals where they lost to Colorado College. I know I said I thought they were going to win the NCHC, and I based that on everything that I had seen from them over the last month, excluding that series against Denver. Now that said, they're not playing Miami. They're not playing even a Colorado College the rest of the way. They're playing teams that are going to be of the Denver caliber, are going to be of the better than Omaha, who beat them late in the regular season. So I like Western on value being an underdog. I think that the line is probably going to shift I don't think it's going to stay where it is. I don't think plus 105 is going to stay. I think that's going to either drift back so that there may be a minus 100 and there a minus 110, but I don't think that's going to shift while they're an underdog. But that said, I think if this is a high scoring game and this is going to hammer the over, I think this favors Western much more than it does BU, even though BU is a team that can light the lamp. I just think Western's a team that's more accustomed. Anytime we're talking about goal scoring, we're talking more usually about the Western team. So Western Michigan, if it's going to be a high scoring game, that's a good value bet with them as a plus 105, plus 110, even if it ventures closer to like a plus 120, plus 130 at some point.
I don't see the value there though. That's my problem is that, if I want to get value on an underdog, I want it like plus 150 at least. So at this point, I don't see the value on Western. It gets there. I don't think it will. Could they win? For sure. I mean, they found, and they've won low scoring games. I go back to last year's regional where they played Northeastern, and those were two pretty good offenses last year. I believe it was either 2-1 or 3-2. It was a low scoring game in the regional semis back then. So I have a concern about the over under. I still think I would have to favor BU just being the hotter team, the better team. And they're close to home. They'll have a little bit of a fan base. I'm not going to call it home ice advantage. This is the one region I think that has the lighter attendance.
I will say this is a hell of a way to come out of the gates with on Thursday.
Right?
This is like when you get that 8-9 game in the basketball tournament to kick off your day. Like they knew what they were doing, putting this one first. Let's come strong out of the gates and hook the people in.
The other half of that bracket has the number 1 seed in the region, 4th overall Denver, a minus 220 against a plus 180 Cornell. Over under on that one is 5.5.
I was on a podcast earlier today, and I said that I was okay with throwing out the one game Denver lost to CC last week. The reason was they ran into a great goaltender, and Barrico was fantastic. I know that Denver's a little bit banged up, so that is a concern. I know that Magnus Krona is a question mark. I know that they have some injuries up front. I still like this Denver team. Not that I don't like Cornell. This is maybe the toughest region. I think that we'll get to Fargo next, and I think that one is pretty tough as well. But this is one of the toughest regions. But I still like Denver. Don't love the price. I mean, that's a really big price you have to lay on Denver. But I like Denver in this game. They are a good team. They have the national championship pedigree. They have guys in the roster, in the locker room that won last year in Boston. I think they'll feel actually comfortable probably getting back to the East Coast. They were here last year and did great. So I think there'll be some comfort level from David Carl and his team to play out here. But Mike Schaefer, he's always gotten his teams up to play great games in NCAA tournaments. I go back to a few years back when they lost to Providence in the regional final, but their semi was fantastic. They played a great game against Northeastern, and I know that they can get up for this game. I think when all push comes to shove, I still love Denver here.
See, I like Cornell, and there are reasons for this, which is that Cornell is a number 4 seed. Cornell was one bounce of a puck away from being a number 2 seed. And when you look at what happened to Cornell in the conference semifinal against Harvard, that game was as advertised. You get a scoreless game where the teams didn't give in and then they lose in overtime to Harvard. That could have gone any way. And when they lose, they fall to the number 4 seed and are essentially the second to last team into the tournament right now. Merrimack being the lowest seed in as an at-large bid. So for me, Cornell is a number 2 seed masquerading as a number 4. And for that, I think when we talk about number 1 seeds that could go down, this region's a murderer's row. This is a brutal region. And if you're Denver, the fact that you, just by virtue of where you finished as you wind up as a number 1 seed, yeah, but now you have to come east and you're playing in a region that involves a Cornell team that could be that good. That's scary. Cornell's deep. Cornell's very deep. They have a lot of depth scoring. They have good goaltending in Ian Shane. This is a bad matchup for Denver. Now, and when you're looking at, like you said, the price point for Denver, this just smells of a bad matchup for Denver right now. And as a defending national champion, they do get, a half a goal credit in my mind. But I think Cornell is, I would have much rather, if I saw Denver playing Merrimack, I'd probably feel better. If I saw Denver playing, any of the last two seeds, Canisius or Colgate, I'd feel a lot better than I do of watching them see Cornell. I just think Cornell's a bad matchup.
Yeah, and you have to think that Denver is 1/1,000,000th of a percentage point away from being the number 3 seed. In that case, they'd be playing Colgate instead of Cornell. I don't know if there's much of an advantage there, but still, you always think of the number 4 overall. They do get the toughest matchup, and the committee was able to put the 13 seed, the 13 overall, which, as you did point out, Dan, they could have been the 8 or the 7.
I think they'd have been the 7.
Yeah, I think they would have been the 7. If Friday night hadn't gone the direction it had, that's a big drop. It's kind of a weird drop to actually move down as far as they did. But Cornell, you're right to say that they are a good team. I just think Denver probably has a little bit more offensive depth. That's where I look at. A lot of double-digit scores up the top there. But we'll see that one play out. I mean, it's like you said, this is a really tough region.
Yeah, and the one thing just to counter that on the double-digit scoring is you got to remember that Cornell also plays a handful less games than everyone. So some of those guys who maybe have 8-9 goal scorers on the Cornell team might have 11 or 12 goals somewhere else just because they had the 6 games less from being an Ivy League school.
Denver also has the added advantage, if you want to call it that, of having a target on its back as the defending national champion.
Yeah, the Wolves in the hen house. I mean, that's they're back. And I did not think Denver was the national favorite last year out of the 4 teams that were in Boston. I actually thought they were the worst of the 4, and then they went out and won it all. So now they're the best team, defending national champions. They got the pieces back. Yeah, that's always a bad sign. So all this said, they're going to win this game like 6-0 now.
Yeah, I think Ed and I remember sitting in West End Johnny's twice last year picking against Denver. Every one of us picked against Denver. It was the only team we never probably mentioned the entire weekend for having the potential to win. We had all the other 3 teams potentially winning games. Denver, I never even gave them a shot, but good for the Pioneers. And now you have to look at them and say that they certainly have a shot.
Let's go to the other Thursday bracket, and that has in the first game a state school in Minnesota matchup. Minnesota State, which is plus 110 against a minus 140 St. Cloud State. The over-under is 5.5. You talk about a great matchup to get things going. This gets things going pretty well out in Fargo.
2 champions, too. The CCHA champion in Minnesota State against St. Cloud State, which won the NCHC. And, throwing the fact that Canisius is in that bracket as well, the Atlantic hockey champion. This is a tough bracket. Champions are tough. And we see this in basketball all the time. The teams that come in having just won their conference championship, and then they go in and they play really well against a team that might have been a much higher seed. But maybe they didn't come in with the same confidence. And confidence means a lot. When you're playing well and you know that you can score and you're getting good goaltending, and you just went through a 2-game tournament the weekend before for many teams, especially, obviously St. Cloud did. What it's like to go through those 2 games. Those are back-to-back days, but now you get 3 days to play 2 games. I really feel like that is an advantage. Minnesota State, they get in on a lot of drama, coming from 2 goals down in the last couple of minutes of regulation, tying the game, winning it in overtime in front of their big home crowd. I'm very interested in this region to see how fan support plays into it. This is a region that was sold out. Tickets were totally sold out. I mean, I know every school has an allotment, I think, of 500. So maybe that's 2,000 fans in the building from the 4 schools. But then how many seats were sold by North Dakota fans that bought the tickets, hoping that the Fighting Hawks would be there? They're not. How many people still go and just go to cheer against Minnesota? And how many people sold their tickets? And if that's the case, can St. Cloud and can Minnesota State buy some of those tickets, make the trip up to Fargo? I think that you can change the atmosphere in a relatively good size, but still a pretty small building up in Fargo. I want to see what the atmosphere feels like, because I still think it's going to be a very pro North Dakota crowd, which I don't even know what that means for the first round. Do they all cheer for St. Cloud State because in the NCHC? Do they all cheer for Minnesota State because they don't like St. Cloud State? I don't know where even the allegiance goes. Does anybody get a home ice feel out of this first game?
Looking straight away at the games, there's also one other piece of it, which when you look at the way the teams have played historically in the tournament, St. Cloud, unfortunately, St. Cloud did go to the national championship game in 21, 2 years ago. But St. Cloud has had to deal with a bit of the funk over the last 5 years. The 18 loss to Air Force, the 19 loss to AIC, the loss last year to Quinnipiac in the first round. Each time they've kind of had this run that's got them to the tournament, and then once they get into the tournament, something goes wrong. And Minnesota State is kind of the opposite way, which is they get this run into the tournament, and then reputationally they went to the Frozen Four last year. I actually think 2 years ago they in 19, I mean, they lost to Providence. They were the number 1 seed, but they were sent to Providence. There was that 1 year that Minnesota State was sent to Providence. I don't remember what year it was.
It was 19.
It was 19. Yeah, and they were the 1 seed, but they were sent because Providence, their opponent, was a host school. So that's just
these are school. They were not a host school.
They were not. I thought they were. Oh, that's right. Brown was the host school.
Yeah,
that's right.
The benefit of the doubt of wanting to pack a building.
Yeah. So when you look at the way that kind of broke down, to me, these are two teams that, yes, they have done something along the way to erase the funk, but they still have a bit of funk dating back 4 or 5 years relative to the postseason. So depending on how you kind of feel about the way these teams respond in the postseason, that's going to depend on kind of how you bet this game. I would say that 5.5 is a great number for this game. I would even look the under, but 5.5.
I like the under here too.
I like but it's a great number because a 3-2 game, you start pulling the goalie, you get an empty netter, you pull it again. I mean, I could see this score ballooning on the basis that somebody had to pull a goalie.
Let's go to the upper side of that bracket. Number 1 overall seed Minnesota takes on Canisius, minus 825 for the Gophers, a plus 550 for the Golden Griffins. Over under is 6. Minnesota comes in after a 4-3 loss to Michigan in the Big Ten championship. And Canisius, the winner of Atlantic hockey, downing the 5th, 6th, and 7th seeds in that tournament to get there. Goaltending for Canisius and maybe some transition, but boy, can they do anything in those categories against Minnesota?
Can I throw one thing in here?
Yeah.
Just to throw in there for the sake of saying it. Nobody wants to bet Minnesota in this game at minus 825. If you are betting Minnesota, just don't do it.
You need a triple parlay.
Yeah.
Something with a plus 200 somewhere, and then maybe somewhere along the line you get something around even money. That'll bring you closer to plus 250, plus 300 for the overall bet. You're right. You can't take it, Minnesota. And if you sit there and say, "Oh, Minnesota's such a lock, I'm going to lay 10,000 on them," be prepared to lose that $10,000. This is the game that I say, this is pizza money, and I don't know how expensive pizza has gotten in Boston. I think I could buy 2 pies for about $50. So I would take $50 and throw it on Canisius. That's my pizza money. I won't have pizza for a week, but at least I might have a chance at winning a little over $500, and I would take that in a heartbeat.
Wait a second.
No, I'm sorry. I said that wrong. It's not even that high. It's less than $400.
Uwe, I'm just going to throw one thing in here, though. One of these two teams is already a champion, and it's not the Gophers.
Yeah, I had somebody who's pretty in tune in college hockey say that this Minnesota team is great, but they remind him of Doug Woog teams that always had some of the best players, but never won trophies. I don't know if I agree with that, but here we are.
I'm just saying that to inflame Minnesota people. And
I'm not even trying to be inflammatory, but I think that that's an accurate, potential storyline, is that this team does great things, but tournaments are hard to win. You can say the same thing for Quinnipiac, a really good team that doesn't win a lot of tournaments.
Well, there is actually one thing in here that is worth very briefly mentioning about Canisius. And if you're looking at the team, and that is that they're very old. They're incredibly old. I think the average age on this team is almost 24 years old.
Bob Motzko would call that grizzled.
Yeah, this is an old. And when you get into the postseason and you have to play a game against a bunch of old guys, and this is what we've seen out of Atlantic hockey the last few years, is that the older players are much more difficult to beat in a one-game postseason setting. And a lot of the big component of that is because your players who are playing, your draft picks, your ultra talented guys that are playing at your Big Ten and your Hockey East schools are drafted because when they're 24 years old, they need to be in the NHL. And your guys in Atlantic hockey, when they're 24 years old, they're finishing out their college careers. So you're taking a guy who is a very physically mature player and you're putting him on the ice. And that's one of the big complaints I know about the age requirements and everything. And that's we could do 3 hours on that, but Canisius is an older team. And that is something that you can't discount with a bunch of guys who are pushing 24 years old.
Canisius is the oldest team in the country. They began here at 23.1 years average as of October 1st. By the way, a team that is in that same top 10 list, tied for, I believe, 9th, is Minnesota State in the same region.
Grizzled. Well, so the over under on this, you know what? I'm going to pipe in on this. I can see Minnesota being up 4-2 and Canisius giving up a couple empty net goals, getting you over. If that game is like a 2-1, 3-2 game, boy, you've got Canisius having played terrifically. The lower the score is in that game, the better chance that Canisius has. But over under, where do you go with that?
It's a 6.
Yeah,
I stay away.
You avoid it like the plague.
I do. I think that if Minnesota wins, they're going to get their goals, and Minnesota's favored to win. So I think they're going to pop their 4, maybe 5. Then you get 1 or 2 from Canisius. I mean, and like you said, if it ends up being a 3-2 game, it could be a 5-2 game really quickly, because that Trevor Large might give up 1 and then still have 2 minutes left and pull his goalie again, and then it's next thing you know, it's 5-2 and you just lost. And the best you can do is hope for a push on this one. I don't like this one at all.
Well, with that, we've covered Thursday. We still have Friday to go, and we'll do that in a moment. USCHO Edge is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida.
All right, class, it's the NCAA Men's Frozen Four. Welcome to Fandom 101. Want to help your team rule the rink? Here's your assignment. Lesson 1, go big for every goal. 2, when you bring it, bring enough for the whole class. And 3, attendance is encouraged, but passion is mandatory. The NCAA Men's Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida. Buy your tickets today at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. Class dismissed.
Welcome back to USCHO Edge. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Dan Rubin. Bridgeport, Connecticut is where we head next. They get underway Friday at 2 p.m. And this is maybe one of the most intriguing and certainly the closest matchup of the weekend. Harvard, a -120, Ohio State, a -110, and an over-under of 5.5. Sounds like it's right on the money all the way across.
I think so. I don't know. I don't have a good pick in this one. I don't have a good reason to pick either team. I love Teddy Donato's team, but I love Steve Brolick as a coach. So this is a really one. This is a game that I just have a hard time really handicapping. If gun was to my head, I'd take Harvard for the heck of it. because they can play some pretty shutdown hockey. I think 5.5. I'd be leaning under on this one, believe it or not. I think this is going to be a 2-1 game. I don't think there's going to be a ton of goal scoring in it. But Harvard proved last weekend they were comfortable playing low scoring games. They've got to be careful not to get into a situation like they did on Saturday where they gave up a couple of, goals to Colgate that just came kind of out of the blue. They've got to play tighter defense in all their scenarios. I'd like to see Harvard start scoring though. They will not win this national championship if they can't put up probably an average of 3.5 goals a game in the 4 games. So that would be 14 goals minimum throughout 4 games. Listen, you want to start with 7 in the first game, it helps. But I don't see that for Harvard right now. Ohio State, plenty of talent, great goaltending, up and down the roster. I love Ohio State. Again, gun to my head, I'm picking Harvard.
I think Harvard has one minor gap in the depth of its defense compared to Ohio State's forwards versus the Ohio State defense against the Harvard forward lines. But I think that is compensated by the fact that Mitchell Gibson's such a good goaltender. I love Harvard. I love Teddy Donato, which is weird because when I grew up, Harvard was like I'm never getting in there. I'm never rooting for them. I grew up around here and was like, looked at the Ivy League Harvard and was like, nope, not for me. And now I'm looking at Harvard and I'm like, man, I love that team. Love that team. Love that coach. Love the players. I'm very pro Harvard, but I'm not picking against them right now. But I do find it very hard to pick them, largely because of Ohio State. And I do think this is going to be a rival. What we said about BU in that game, the BU Western game, about how, this could be goal scoring, this could go over. I think this could play out being one of those 1-0, 2-1 overtime games like Harvard has already played. Like they played against Colgate with a 3-2 loss, a 3-2 win over Clarkson. I'm interested to see how Ohio State does in a game like that out east. But I'm not concerned about it. I just think it's going to be a great game. I'm not sure if I'd bet it, but you're right. Gun to my head, I'm probably taking Harvard here too. It's great, by the way, when you're at a young age in the Boston area and you just realize you're never getting into Harvard. That's just like, you realize it like 12 years old. Like, nope, not getting in there.
I was just kind of trying to figure out how young you are because you don't even remember like 89 when Harvard was a wagon and won the national championship. I mean,
I was 4 years. I was born in 85, so I'm not that young, but I'm young enough. I'm young enough.
I remember Harvard being just an unreal team with a guy named Donato leading it.
Listen, the late '80s were a dark age in the Rubin house did not really get into the college hockey game until Jay Pandolfo led BU to a title. So it shows you, yeah, it was a mid '90s house.
I have shoes older than you, Dan.
I'm pushing 40.
So are my shoes. I think I'm exaggerating. I know I have a pair of shoes that I wore in a wedding in 1993 that I still have. So they've hardly been worn. Anyway, the other half of that bracket, Quinnipiac, number 2 overall, hosting or up against Merrimack. Quinnipiac minus 220, the Warriors plus 180. The over-under, one of the lower ones, in fact, the lowest, tied for the lowest at 5. Merrimack, all season long, we've been wondering. They were all the way up to like 3 or 4 in the pairwise right before the semester break, plummeted to be out of the pairwise bubble as the season went on, had a good finish. Quinnipiac upset by Colgate in the semifinal round up in Lake Placid. But those two teams come into this maybe as one of the more likely upsets in the first round.
No, it's a popular one. I think I'm going to go back to last week when we were doing this and we were talking about the conference finals. Jimmy and I both said Colgate keep the game close, and then in a 1-goal game they went to double overtime. They won the game. I said the Quinnipiac system, for whatever reason, once you get into these situations, seems to fulfill the blueprint, break down the defense and beat the goaltender and win a 1-game playoff. Merrimack sure feels like the team that's riding a heater to get in. Quinnipiac seems like the team that is dealing with the yeah, they can't really win the big one anymore, can they? And they haven't won the big one in a while. At least that's what it feels like. So after they lost the tournament last year, they lost the tournament the year that there were only 4 teams playing. They haven't won a conference championship since 2016 when they went to the national title game, in the postseason at least. So, I mean, you're dealing with that kind of reputation, and Merrimack, truthfully, is probably going to travel a good amount of people down to Connecticut. I mean, they were packing people into the Garden last weekend. So this is a bad matchup for Quinnipiac. But that said, isn't that usually when the team that's the favorite, everyone's saying they're going to lose, they're going to lose, they're going to lose, they come out and they win. So I think this is a tough matchup, but at the same time, Quinnipiac, they did a lot of things right to get to this point, and you can't really discount them on one game.
I agree. Quinnipiac, any team that loses one game, you can't criticize too much. It's why I don't get all over Cornell. It's why I don't get all over Denver. You lose a semifinal game that you weren't supposed to lose. I get it. For Quinnipiac, I think the issue to me is how a team responds to the adversity of a one-game playoff. And when I look at the Bobcats and their history, they've won, we did this on Monday, Ed. I think I said they won 9 regular season titles. So they were the number 1 seed in the tournament 9 times since Rand Pecknall has been their coach. They've won just 2 titles out of the number 1 seed. Once they were in I believe it was the MAC way back when, and then once was in the ECAC. They found a lot of ways to lose in that time, and including recent years where they've been the top team in the ECAC. They've gotten to a couple of Frozen Fours. Both times they got to the national title game. Both times they had 4-goal losses. I don't know what it is to get Quinnipiac over the national hurdle. Obviously, I don't even know what it is to get them over the ECAC hurdle. But do I think they can get past Merrimack? They should be able to. But did I watch Scott Borik's team play gutsy hockey all last weekend, all the weekend before through the hockey tournament? They played 3 overtime games, 2 much double overtime. Both of those they won. The third they lost in overtime to BU in a game that they had a 2-1 lead late. I feel like this Merrimack team has a little bit of destiny in them. They've been through a lot this year, losing their coach, Josh Siako, days before the season began. I feel like they want, they want to do something to really put themselves on the map. It's a tough situation. They've never won. They've never advanced in an NCAA tournament. Is this the year? This could be the upset. But I just have this gut feeling that Rand Pecknold will get a great response from his team this weekend. Something bigger than they've been able to put together many times.
The difference for me in this game is that Merrimack has been playing essentially postseason single elimination hockey since the beginning of February. Right. Which when they torpedoed down in the pairwise and they were playing all horrible. That started in that BU series. They won 5 in a row to end the season. They beat BC, beat Lowell, and then they lost in overtime to BU, and then had to sweat out a bit. It was not a guarantee that they were making the tournament after they lost the conference championship game by any stretch.
They had 60 minutes of waiting.
Yeah, they had to make sure Colorado College didn't, do something silly. And it's not an easy thing to do. We talked about Jerry Keefe with Northeastern when they were like 40th in the pairwise, and he knew exactly what needed to happen. Whether or not you knew at Merrimack that this is what needed to happen, you still had to win your way in, and that's usually your message. Quinnipiac's known for months they were going to be in, and truthfully, they probably known for about a month and a half they were going to be a number 1 seed. I mean, it was going to be very hard to knock them down. That said, they needed to face some adversity, and unfortunately for Merrimack, it happened last week. So now with a little adversity, they're a little, they got wounded. The Russian is cut. Drago's cut. His corner's ready to go. And, here comes big bad Quinnipiac back out of the corner to lay a hurting on someone. So, and it's in Bridgeport. It's 25 minutes from campus. There's going to be a lot of people down there. This is going to be great atmosphere. I think if Merrimack brings fans, it's still going to be great atmosphere for Quinnipiac. It's not far. And they have great support on campus. They have great support in the community. This is and with everyone saying it, they're going to come out amped up, and that's going to be a big deal.
Merrimack got 20 buses of their fans, their student fans, to the Garden last weekend. Let's see if they can make it the 165 miles from North Andover to Bridgeport with 20 buses and Scott Borick's lauded band. He talks about that, mentioned them on Twitter again, how great it was to have the best band in the land. You know, when he was there, last time Merrimack was in, they had to hire Dayton to be the band. So now they've got their own band, but it should be a great atmosphere. Over under, this feels like an under game. Do you touch this one at 5?
Yeah, under. Go ahead.
Under.
Yeah, go ahead.
Under.
I'm fine. You know what? You might get bit by a 2-2 game that goes to overtime, and you're going to push. But you'll push at least. I see this as 1-0, 2-1, maybe 3-1. I don't worry about under here.
Well, let's go to Allentown. That's the last bracket for us. In the early game has a matchup between Penn State, they're minus 150, against Michigan Tech, a plus 120. Maybe I'm a little surprised to see Michigan Tech as the underdog, but this is a pretty close matchup. The over-under is 5 on this one.
Yeah, I don't know if Tech should be the underdog in this one, to be honest with you. But I think this is considered a road game. Despite the fact this is not Penn State's home arena, it's still a road game in Allentown. You're still going to have, probably, I'm going to guess they're going to sell probably 7,000 tickets to Penn State fans. I do feel bad for the second game here, Michigan Colgate, which could be played in front of an empty stadium. But Penn State, Tech will get their 500 tickets. They'll probably sell all of them, and they will put fans in. There's no doubt about that. But Penn State has done everything they can to sell this. They've known they've been in for a while. They've been selling tickets for this for a while. It's going to be a good atmosphere. And that's what Michigan Tech has to deal with, is just quieting the crowd.
I feel like Penn State hasn't played for a while. I know they lost in the quarterfinals, and I think they might be the one team in the tournament that hasn't played. They're the only team that I think hasn't played since the quarterfinals.
Longest break. They've had the longest break because that extra week in the Big Ten playoffs. Yeah.
So they're looking at close to 3-week break when this thing gets underway, or a 3-week break when this thing gets underway. And that to me is both a good and a bad thing at this point, especially where Northern's coming off a bad loss to, Michigan Tech's coming off a bad loss to Northern Michigan in the semifinal when they lost 4-0 at home. But I am going to say that, that has a galvanizing presence when you get on the road, and Allentown is Penn State country. I know sometimes you get into the state in a state as big as Pennsylvania, and we'll split. You got East Pennsylvania, West Pennsylvania. This guy's doing this. No, this is going to be a Penn State crowd. And honestly, even if it wasn't that East-West setup with Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, it's still going to be a Penn State crowd. They're all going to turn out. Penn State is huge for this reason, and I think it's going to be very difficult for Michigan Tech to go in there. I know you said I'm shocked they're even an underdog. If this is low scoring, then I see Michigan Tech doing something. But Penn State shoots from the popcorn stand. Isn't that what we like to say?
That's Jimmy's vaunted line there. You mentioned about a home crowd, and it's funny because the Penn State campus is exactly the same distance from Allentown as Merrimack is from Bridgeport. But you're right, the whole state loves Penn State. I mean, of course, yeah. I mean, it's a regional. It's a team that the whole state has. There's no other rival for them in that. And hockey's fairly new there, although it's getting to be less new as it goes along. That what you mentioned, Dan, about 3 weeks off, that is a real opportunity for Michigan Tech to get out there and maybe jump on Penn State while they're trying to get their timing and their legs back.
Has to be quick. The first 10 minutes of that game is very important. And really for both teams, because if Penn State gets the crowd going and gets it in their favor, boy, can Michigan Tech really fall behind. But if Michigan Tech can take advantage of the fact that Penn State might have some I'll call them bus legs, but fatigue legs or just bench legs because you haven't played a real game. You can't simulate these types of atmospheres. You can't simulate these situations. Play as many scrimmages as you want in practice. You can't simulate this. So this could be a very interesting first 10 minutes of this game.
The concern for me is the over-under, which is at 5, which means that I think the handicappers, the odds makers, are kind of considering a Penn State would go out and win the game 4-0 or 3-0 or something like that. For me, I don't think that's going to happen. So for me, it's shoot the over on this one. Yeah. I think this could be, even if Penn State gets going, this could be a 5-1, 6-1 game, 6-2. Again, if you're looking at a 1-goal game in the third period, someone's going to pull the goalie. You're going to hit that. You're going to hit that over. I don't see this staying under 5. I think that's way too low here.
And Tech can score goals.
Yeah,
it's not a team that can't score. So I think that both of these teams are going to put up some goals. I actually see this as maybe one of the 3 highest scoring games in the tournament. So 5 just didn't feel right to me.
The other half of the bracket has the number 3 overall seed Michigan. With interim head coach Brandon Naurato, isn't it time to take interim off of his title? Michigan is minus 375 against a plus 285 Colgate, their first ECAC championship since 1990, and the first for their longtime head coach Don Vaughn. A plus 285 there for the Raiders, and 6.5 is the over-under.
Yeah, second highest line here in terms of a favorite, only behind Minnesota. I think this one is probably properly set, given the fact that Michigan should win. I just have a hard time betting against Don Vaughn right now. This team has played very well in a lot of tough games, backs against the wall type of games. They had to go on the road in the ECAC quarters. They had to survive Dartmouth at home in the first game. That was a 5-3 game. I know they fell behind 1-0. I think they scored 5 straight, then kind of had to hang on after they gave up 2 goals, I think, in the second half and the third period, made it a 5-3 game. But then they go on the road. They find a way to sweep St. Lawrence. Then they take down the number 1 team in the ECAC and a very good Quinnipiac team. Then they take down Harvard. They've done everything they're required to do in the postseason. This is as good of a Colgate team as you can imagine. And here we are with 2 more champions facing off against each other. Michigan played really well down the stretch. Found a way to win the Big Ten championship despite trailing by a goal in the third period. 2 late goals in that one to win the Big Ten. This is a tough one to pick, believe it or not, for me. I would leave it alone because the number on Michigan isn't good. I'd probably want to take Michigan here, but I understand that Colgate. This is an upset that Colgate could pull off if they put it all together.
Yeah, I mean, I have a fondness for Colgate. I think anytime you get a good underdog story, Don Vaughn is an amazing human being. He's just a great guy, and is one of those guys that anytime you talk to him, he eats, sleeps, and breathes Colgate and the university, and it's everything about the university, even beyond the hockey rink, and has won and put together this team in my mind the right way, and was forced into the first round against Dartmouth by a bad weekend, and they faced adversity after they only took 2 points from Yale and Brown. They lost to Yale, and then went out to Brown and had to win a shootout and didn't get the first round bye. And then they came out and wound up beating the team that got the first round bye when they beat St. Lawrence on the road. So I think that this team has the right mentality right now. Michigan's just so darn good. And Michigan's the team that when I look at the last 2 weeks, I've sat back and said, look, Michigan, this is the reality. You haven't won the big one. Then you beat Ohio State. Then you haven't won a tournament, and you're still not the best team in the Big Ten. And then you went out and beat Minnesota at Minnesota for the conference championship. I have no problem saying Michigan right now is the best team out of the Big Ten. And since the Big Ten, in my mind, is probably the best conference in the country, I think we can all safely say that Michigan probably is your favorite to win the national championship. And if they're not, then they should be. And you don't get to that point. You don't beat Ohio State and Minnesota in the conference tournament to then go out and lose to Colgate, in my mind. That doesn't mean that's not going to happen. It does mean that I would probably look long and hard if you really think Colgate can win this. This would be a pizza money bet for me, but I do love Colgate. I'm not saying anything bad about them. I think they could easily go out and win this. They have a goaltender who's playing out of his mind. They have a defense that's playing out of its mind. They're playing the right way. They could go out and beat anybody. It's just Michigan's so darn good.
I'm glad you brought up Carter Gylander, the goaltender for the Raiders. In the ECAC playoffs, a .943 save percentage, .961 in the semis and the final. He was playing out of his mind. A hot goaltender at this time of year can really mess things up for the favored team.
And just think, it wasn't his net fully last year. It's never fully been his net until this year.
I think that you're right about that, Ed, though. You know, the ability for goaltenders to steal games in this tournament, that's an X factor that nobody probably considers. And the teams that play in high scoring leagues, so let's say that you play in the NCAA, you play in the Big Ten, you're going to pop goals, but can you stop them? That's always my question come this time of year. And listen, both leagues in recent years have proved in spades, yes, they can. But here we are in a year that you have some really good defenses, really good goaltending out east, not well represented because there's less Eastern schools in than ever. But can one of those Eastern schools maybe find a way to make it more difficult for one of these big favorites to score? I think it's possible.
Two last thoughts for me on this one. One, stay out of the box if you're Michigan. You only have a 77% penalty kill, and Colgate's power play is just as good as yours, 21% versus 22% for Michigan. Two is, it's funny you mentioned that, not a lot of teams out east. For years, when I was working on Atlantic hockey, only got the one team in. I used to look at Chris Lurch and say, hey, Chris, for the team preview, who wants to do it? And he'd say, oh, do you want me to do it? And I'd just say yes and go lazy. 4 teams from ECAC because of Colgate. The first year I'm covering ECAC. Is this like karma coming back on me? A quarter of the country comes out of my conference. Come on. That's not fair.
Well, we've got one other thing to talk about here, and that is the team futures, the money line for winning the national championship. It ranges from a plus 250 for Minnesota to a plus 25,000 for Canisius. But the 4 top seeds are the 4 favorites, plus 250 for Minnesota, 350 for Michigan, 550 for Denver, and 600 for Quinnipiac.
It's interesting to see Quinnipiac, the number 2 overall seed, to have the worst of the odds in that one. Good value on Quinnipiac. I'm not surprised to see Minnesota and Michigan as the top 2. I said it a little while ago that I'd love to see the 2 of them in a national title game, and now it actually plays out that they can face off in a national title game. Man, that be fantastic. As I look at this, I'm always looking for value. Obviously you can't take a Canisius at plus 25,000 or Colgate at plus 15,000. But you look at Cornell at 5,000, plus 5,000. Could Cornell put together 4 in a row? I don't know. Could Western Michigan at a plus 2,200? 22-1 for Cornell to put together 4. I'm sorry, for Western Michigan to put together 4 straight wins. Even Boston University sitting at 12-1. I know there's not as much value there, but you lay $300 on BU, hoping to see them win a national championship, and you claim almost $4,000 if they do. I mean, these are good numbers. I don't love the numbers on Minnesota and Michigan. I don't believe Minnesota will win the national championship. I can tell you, number 1 overalls have struggled with this tournament for a long time. I like Michigan. Denver has the pedigree to get back there and do it. Quinnipiac, they know how to get there. St. Cloud State has been in you just look at, there's a lot of teams that have maybe won national championships, BU and Harvard, but it's been, BU was 2009, Harvard was 1989. Western Michigan hasn't won it. Penn State hasn't won it. Ohio State hasn't won it. Minnesota State hasn't won it. Merrimack hasn't won it. Michigan Tech hasn't won it since before I was born. Cornell hasn't won it since the 70s. Colgate's never won it, right?
No.
And Canisius has never won it. So you have more teams in this field that have never won the national championship than teams that have actually won it. There's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams have won it out of 16.
There is one thing that I will throw in there, and I know I've talked a lot about how much I like Cornell, and that's the kiss of death. As a 4 seed, their odds dropped. They dropped significantly. They were not good at those are not, if you're looking strictly by the numbers, those are not good odds. But Cornell again was basically one bounce of the puck away from being a 2 seed and having much different odds. They'd be 12-1, they'd be plus 1,200, they'd be plus 2,000 maybe. It wouldn't be plus 50-1 odds. What I do think is one of the things that gets lost in Cornell's favor, is that 2019 they went to a regional final. 2020 they were the best team in the country, and then COVID canceled that. They played out the string in 21, 22 after they had the year off. They didn't have the same problem that some of the Ivy League schools had. They didn't crater out. And now they come out and again, were a bounce of the puck away from being a number 2 seed. For me, that adds value. The other team that I love in this, in terms of futures, I know Penn State's never won one, but at home for a regional, they haven't played in a couple weeks, which if they can come out and beat Michigan Tech, then I think that's a team that could really shock some people going in. I think that I know we love talking defense wins championships, hot goaltending wins championships, and Penn State's an offensive minded team. The game's also very different right now. And a team that can high fly and score a bunch of goals and score it in bunches with the way the rules package kind of favors offense these days. I genuinely think that Penn State has the depth and has the tools to go out and maybe surprise some folks. You're right, though, Jim. I don't love some of those odds in there. I hate the Minnesota odds. I don't think they're going to win it. I think Michigan can, but I hate the odds. I don't like St. Cloud to win the national championship. I don't think I ever have. The other teams like a Minnesota State, I don't love it. BU, I don't love it. There's just a whole lot of reasons not to bet that for a lot of teams.
I want to say one that I think I might take a flyer at if I were.
Ed, you're betting Canisius, aren't you?
No. Western Michigan at plus 2,200.
Not
Their
bad.
series against Colorado College was uncharacteristic for them. Pat Ferschweiler afterwards said, hey, our scoring depth disappeared on us this weekend. He's a great motivator. It's a team that has put up a lot of goals and has also played defense this season. I mean, they got to get through BU and either Denver or Cornell to get to the Frozen Four. But you know what? If there's somebody that you want to see as the underdog who could pull an upset or two, maybe it's them.
I don't mind that one. So I think the 4 that I have is your 2, Dan. Plus I like BU. Plus I like Western. I can't throw any money on any of them, but those are kind of some of those that I look at and think about and say, those are pretty good odds.
Throw your $50 free bet, Massachusetts people, on Canisius. I don't even know if they expired yet. I don't even know if they expired yet. Who the hell knows?
They expire within 7 days of getting it. So if you
there you go.
Have a chance.
So sign up.
I don't
bet
even
it on
think
Canisius. You'll win $13,000. You can pay off your student loans. I don't even believe
that they would take a $50 bet on Canisius right now. The most you could probably get is $10 through on that one. There's no, I know you said you wanted to throw 10,000 down to win 2.5 billion. Yeah, good luck finding a.
It was million. I did the math wrong. I added a bunch of zeros.
You usually suck at math.
And Ed's the one who said that. I did nothing to do with that.
So Jim, you throw $10 down on it. That's a year's worth of pizza money if you win.
It's a year's worth of pizza. I mean, that's pretty good. That's pizza. That's pizza every week, and good pizza probably too.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're getting good pizza. You're not just getting, it's not delivery, it's DiGiorno. You're getting good.
We're Santarpios. Yeah, we're talking Santarpios right there.
Yeah, you're talking Friday pie and Saturday pie both.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, you're skipping the 555, which I have no complaints about the 555 deal, but you're getting the Grizzly pizza from it's 6 types of meat on it, which by the way. This exists.
That Grizzly pizza or is that grizzled pizza?
Okay. This is a pizza podcast now. It is called The Grizzly. It is in Brattleboro, Vermont at West Brattleboro House of Pizza. It's the only place where I've had it. I'm not doing this for a plug. I'm not doing this for anything. 6 types of meat on the pizza. It traveled with me in a Jeep with one of my best friends to a guy's weekend, and it was consumed. It was in that car ride. It was single-handedly the best slice of pizza I ever got heartburn from.
Who was the cardiologist at the end?
Oh God, that was not
You want to
good.
give him a plug too?
Now people say, okay, guys weekend, what kind of house, what kind of, condition were you in at the end of the night? I'm like, I went to sleep. I just woke, like, it was actually a tame night. And it was like, but you woke up 2:00 in the morning going, what did I do? Why? I can't do this anymore. This is a pizza podcast now.
Brattleboro is outside my delivery area, so I'll have to find an acceptable substitute. And with that, we'll wrap up this edition of USCHO Edge. We've been sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa. Get your tickets now at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. Find our podcast at uscho.com/podcasts or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. For Jim Connelly and pizza-eating Dan Rubin, I'm Ed Trefzger, and this has been USCHO Edge.